we decided to speak together because it's a great pleasure for me to work with Oleksandra. She has been my student for many years, and now she's working on a book about something else. But her first academic degree is connected with history of arts. And actually, we can go to the next slide. It shows where we are. You can see the city of Mykolaiv, the city of Odessa. You can see Crimea. This is our world. This is our area, and it is geographically connected to the Mediterranean Sea because we consider the Black Sea as part as one of the Mediterranean seas. Yeah, if I can use the term from yesterday's presentation, but I would like to say that we have a little bit different idea of what Mediterranean area is than the viewpoint which was articulated yesterday. Because yesterday we learned a lot about the Mediterranean Sea as a border, as I would like frontier between Europe and other non-European countries, and floods of immigrants and dramatic and tragic cases which happen when people, when migrants crossing borders. In our situation, we would say that in particular in our situation, I mean Alexander's and mine, the Mediterranean area will be considered as a cultural myth or mythological space which we would like to enter or belong to. And we decided to focus on the case of Volodymyr Bakhtov. He is an artist from our area. He became a refugee, and we would like to think about how the Mediterranean myth created by this artist is reflected in his artistic experience as a refugee. Now I give the floor to Alexandra because she can speak better, but she knows a lot about Volodymyr Bakhtov. She has studied his works for many years, and then I will join her. Okay, let's continue.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here in this conference. And this map is not only represents our area as it is now, but you can see that it is kind of like connected to the Mediterranean route in very direct sense, because it was colonized by the ancient Greeks. We can see now, not contemporary Greeks, kind of like in the mid first millennia BC. And you can see that it was quite populated by the Greeks at that time, and we still have places which are connected. And it's interesting that we still have Greek population which believe themselves to be the descendants of those Greeks who colonized this area like more than 2000 years ago. And Volodymyr Bakhtov, actually, he is an artist from Nikolaev, but Nikolaev, you just kind of like should understand, it's a really big industrial city which doesn't provide much inspiration for artists who are interested in culture and in history. And that's why when he arrived to the city after finishing his education in Odessa, and it was 1975, he was kind of like uninspired to stay in that place. And he started looking for a place which could inspire him. And he found a very particular place. Now, unfortunately, it is occupied by the Russians, and these landscapes are totally burned and destroyed. You won't see any of this specific beauty of this landscape, but like in the 1975 and in the 70s and the 80s, it was one of the most beautiful places in our area. It is called Kimburn Spit. It's a very long like peninsula, and it was quite wild. There were not too many human settlements, and artists who were in the search of very specific inspiration, specific place, they could find kind of like refuge, kind of like a place where they can feel connected to the land there. And based on this connection to the land, he started creating his first etching series. And You see already in this series, he has like old names of this area. He calls one of the series, these three pictures, Winds of Chimeria. And it's kind of like one of the first recorded names of our area. You can find it in history of Herodotus. And then these two pictures belong to the series Secrets of Tabria. Tabria is another name of our land, but a little bit like from Middle Ages or later time. But actually, he was not happy only with the landscape, like natural landscape. He was looking for something more to inspire him. He was looking for his cultural identity, because somehow he was not happy like to be connected just to industrial city. Yeah, very famous industrial city in the Soviet time, because it had 3 shipyards. It produced warships and vessels for like entire Soviet Union. But still, not all people, not all artists are happy are inspired by this type of, let's say, culture. And it was very interesting part of his biography when he embarked on a sea voyage. There were a group of quite crazy people who, at the end of the Soviet era, built a ship. And it actually was built on the model of a Greek bireme. And they decided to travel from the northern Black Sea back to the metropolis of these Greek colonies. Like you see, they just like traveled in earnest. They were rowing on that ship. And Volodymyr Bakhtov also served as a sailor on oar number 8. So, and here it's his kind of like pass as a seaman. He could show it in any port of their arrival. So they traveled actually around the almost entire Mediterranean Sea. Bakhtov finished his journey on the island of Elba, near Italy, and their ship went across the entire of France till Brest, actually along these rivers and channels, kind of like following the old trade routes. And this actually voyage inspired him very much. During this voyage, he created a series of watercolor paintings, like in Istanbul in Turkey, then Corinth and Ithaca. And actually, he was very much inspired by this space. And somehow he understood, he told me himself that he saw the continuity of landscape and just like seascapes, that Black Sea is kind of like connected to this bigger world of the Mediterranean cultures. And then he found his place with which he could identify. And it was like ancient ruins, actually, of the ancient Greek city of Pontic Olbia. Now it is an archaeological site, and it's kind of like protected by Ukrainian state. There is a lot of excavations undergoing there, because this place, Olbia, means lucky from ancient Greek, and this place is really very lucky because nothing was built on top of it, and archaeologists can discover space, like study it as much as they like, as they want. Unfortunately, this archaeological reserve was heavily shelled by Russians during the current invasion. And for example, I don't really know what was destroyed, because now it's kind of like kept secret what damage was caused to this particular place. And actually, this was the northernmost part of Greek oikumene, and here Greek civilization encountered a vast world of the steppe. And in the 5th century BC, Herodotus visited Olbia and left the best description of the city and its inhabitants preserved from antiquity. So you can read about this city in his history. And it's kind of like very interesting that in Ukraine, danger and invasion comes normally not from the sea, but from the steppe, from the land. It's kind of like the sea for us, the way of escape. And rivers, which are also very important in our regions, are kind of like borders which kind of like protect us from this wilderness of this steppe world, which is fascinating in itself, but for us quite dangerous. And this current invasion again proves this danger of this like big land mass from which all these invading people come to Ukraine. And actually, when Bakhtov was happy to find his place, he built his house. And this is kind of like not just his house, it's his art studio. It's a place where a lot of artists meet, a lot of interesting cultural events take place. But now he had to leave this house because the village, which is kind of like situated on the border of Olbia, It is also was heavily shelled, and people were killed, and he had to leave it. And it's interesting that when he escaped Ukraine in March 2022, he escaped to Greece. For the first 5 months of his forced migration, he stayed in Greece near LFC, near Athens. And then he had to move to Germany because of some health issues. And actually, he also was very interested in history of the land, and he created series of etchings illustrating the fourth book of Herodotus' history, Melpomene, dedicated to Scythian lands. And you can see here the attack of the Scythian army, and it's a very interesting story about Scythian king Schiller in Olbia, who was so much in love with Greek culture, and he had to pay for that with his own life. You can read about in Herodotus. And then he started to recollect what he saw during his travels in Mediterranean. And you see, he started to create this composition with this, like, the very foundational bricks of any human civilization. And like these ceramics, they're quite scientific, these etchings, because they are very true to what was found in Olbia. He even just like gives the proper names to this pottery. And he started to work with the archaeological space of this reserve, and you can see that there is a lot of this destroyed pottery, and it just like lying around after the excavation. And he started to create such art objects which kind of like then get destroyed because they stay in the natural environment, that kind of like he reassembles, he gives some, at least for a while, he gives some sense to these remnants of old civilization and makes them relevant to contemporary art lovers. And then he also developed a very interesting so-called ritual of compensation. They took place on necropolis of Olbia, because archaeology, they kind of like uncover graves, they kind of like study the culture even in graves, and kind of like they leave them as they are. And Bakhtov invented this ritual of compensation, trying kind of like artistically compensate the losses caused by leaving people to the dead, kind of like compensate and just draw the line between two worlds, to not to let this dead come back and maybe harm living people. But still, it was done with some respect to the dead, because here you see he was like moving along this wall, kind of like sacrificing his shadow, like coinciding with these figures, kind of like sacrificing his life energy to these dead people, like trying to calm them down and just bring peace to them. And then he developed a very interesting technique, which is called heliography. At first, he used it like only line. It is a drawing with the living fire, photographed with long exposure. It's not a combined photo shot. It's like one photo shot. You just like do something in space, and photo camera, if you put it on long exposure, it can photograph it as a one take. He developed it, and he started to recreate the lost architecture of many archaeological sites, ancient Greek archaeological sites of the south of Ukraine, creating these three-dimensional structures. Again, I'm emphasizing it's not like structure, it's like a three-dimensional drawing, photographed with one take. So, and here it's also in Crimea, the place which probably is now, I don't know, ruined by Russians. We don't know what they're doing to archaeological sites there, but actually it was very famous. It was Chersonesus, which actually ancient Greek city which existed very kind of like till the 13th century AD already as a part of Byzantine Empire. And this is very important for the development of his pictorial language. This landscape painting, they also were painted on the walls of these graves in necropolis. Again, kind of like dedication to the dead. And then he started working with human body and this texture of the land. It's called Olbian Mysteries, because in Olbia, they discovered a lot of interesting and quite clandestine figurines depicting goddesses, and the iconography is kind of very specific. You just don't know this iconography from the textbooks about Greek culture, about Greek sculpture. They are quite peculiar. And actually, he also created a lot of this picture of these Olbian misters, and you see how interestingly he works with covers with female body and with the landscape and texture of the land. It's quite symbolically charged. And then he kind of like switched to recreating some ancient Greek sculpture groups, animation of Phidias. And actually, we're showing this to show you how he developed the plastic language he used to depict the triptych we are going to talk about later. And now just like this is like short, and then Oleksandr kind of switches to his analysis. This is kind of like proto idea of what you are going to see further, and it is called ancient horror because like for the ancient people he read somewhere in some books, it was very scary to be lost in darkness and not to understand the space around them. So they are covered in this strange cover, and they don't understand where they are. They feel lost. And in his pictorial language, it's very often the symbol of this loss of not understanding where you are. It's kind of like is repeated quite often in his pictures. And now we just switch to the triptych. Oleksandr, the floor is yours.
So when the full-scale invasion came, it meant the total destruction of our world. So that's why we decided to show you this selection of wonderful images. You see, this world has been destroyed. Maybe something left, but it's not the case of Volodymyr Bakhtov only, because as far as I'm concerned, I also left my destroyed world and so on. And what happens then to refugees who come to other countries? Actually, the main idea of our research and of our projects, which we're going to do in our Ukrainian team, with our Ukrainian team, we're going to focus on the only type of migrants. This is refugee. What has been refugee in comparison to many others refugees from all other countries that come to Europe? And in our case, you see, we would like to emphasize the creativity as a form of getting through these dramatic and sometimes and very often tragic experience. And you see that Vladimir Bakhtov actually could take his body and he could take his mind, and he found some resources, more limited than he used to have in Mykolaiv. And he came back actually to the very beginning of his artistic search for mythological space, and he created a triptych which is titled The River. And you can imagine, yes, that one group of the people on the left bank, they cross the river to get to the right bank. You see, the right bank of the river is where Mykolaiv, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa, and Europe is. You see, it's a safe bank because geographically our banks are very interesting. You see, the right bank is always higher, much higher. It's a high bank, and the left bank is low bank. You see, and just the main purpose is to be safe. To escape, we have to jump over the river. And now I give the floor to Oleksandra. She will speak very quickly about what we can see in the picture, and we'll come to the conclusions.
Yeah, actually, it is kind of like depiction of his and my own experience, because when the full-scale invasion started, we were like, I was on the left bank in Mykolaiv, Vladimir Bakhtov was on the right bank in Olvia, because just to get there, you have to cross the river. And like in the first hours, I called him and asking what to do, where to escape, because we were hearing that tanks were moving from Kherson to Mykolaiv, and it was kind of like really true. We had 2 tank battles around Mykolaiv, and yeah, we won, luckily. But at that like first hours of the war, it was so uncertain. And for me, my native town is also on the right bank of the Buk River, and I just wanted to go kind of like home to the right bank of the river. And when we left, we were like crossing a lot of rivers, just going to the right bank, because in Ukraine you have a lot of rivers and a lot of right banks. And the left bank, unfortunately, the Dnieper River, if you know the at least a little bit geography of Ukraine. The Dnieper River divides Ukraine in almost two halves, and the left bank is occupied by Russians, not entirely, but a big chunk of it. And actually, Kherson is on the right bank, but all across the river, Russians are standing there. And that left bank became kind of like place of desperation and darkness. And here he depicted this like circular movement when people don't know how to find the way out, and only someone, and he will repeat this motif of something in the center of the picture, someone is standing, probably trying to calm people down, but they don't see, they don't know where to go. They're going in circles, because living under occupation, it's really a very horrible experience. I still do have friends living there, and then just like what they're telling me, you wouldn't like to hear that information, dear people. And then there is the central part, which is called the middle of the river. And you see how interesting the composition is built. In the center, you have this gap, and it is a liminal space. And here from the left bank, we are going to the right bank. You see people just like embarking on these symbolically depicted boats and disembarking here on the right bank. And kind of like there is this gap which represents this desperation and fear not to cross the river, because it's really many people died while crossing the river because Russians were shooting people crossing the river in the boats, like usual civilians with their animals. And actually, this is the most important part. And here you see like people suddenly show their humanity, because in the act of helping each other, you show your humanity. And here you see the faces, you see women and men, you see children. This is the moment when people show their best qualities, like saving other people's lives. And then they come to the right bank, and again you see these kind of like covers, but now it's just like savans, like those shrouds which cover people when they're dead. And you see the iconographically, this is the iconography of when Jesus Christ is taken off the cross. This like figure is a fallen soldier, because unfortunately Bakhtov lost several relatives in this war, his nephew, his like cousin, and unfortunately some of his family live in the occupied territory. For him it's very personal, so he has these losses, he knows, it's kind of like first-hand experience. But here again, in the middle of this picture, we see the light coming down, still bringing new hope, that we do hope that this crossing of the rivers will stop, and we will can come back to our like own banks, whichever right or left, and we will continue to live peacefully there. Because Ukraine is a really peaceful country. We don't care about great power in the world, about conquering territories, great ideologies. We just want to have our happy, prosperous life, which we really had before the war. Ukraine is kind of like maybe not that very European country, but quite nice and hospitable country. And I hope when the war is over, you will come and see it with your own eyes. Thank you very much.
And we come to the conclusion. You see, you can ask where is the Mediterranean dimension in the pictures we just have shown you. But and I would like to come back to one of the presentations of yesterday, because in one of them it was said that we have to look for a myth, for mythology, because if we depict our realities in something like naturalist or realistic way, it will not work, because it will be not very interesting, boring, in it's just becoming routine. But myth, it has a powerful energy and makes all our personal individual stories understandable to all other people. And you can see here that the spatial mythology, which was created by Volodymyr Bakhtov before all his experiments, you see, and this synthetic approach, which we describe as Mediterranean experience, you see, it is used in the triptych to describe the tragedy of Ukrainian refugees. Thank you very much for your attention.